Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
And we have on our live line Dr. Robert A. Heineman, Alfred University political science professor emeritus. Well, Dr. Bob, you just listened, I think, over in Alfred to the Jonathan Mark interview with Corning Republican Congressman Tom Reed. Did you have any thoughts on what the congressman said this morning?
Well, I think it's pretty clear he's involved in the negotiations and has done what he could to bring the Democrats to the president. And obviously they have some Democrats now in the House who have talked to the president and obviously I think are talking among themselves. I think the real problem is, as he's pointed out and as everyone can kind of see, is the intransigence of the Democrat leadership. And I do think that, again, the question of what Pelosi tries to do there is key, because this whole idea of trying to hold together this rather tenuous majority that elected her speaker, I mean, we've mentioned that before, that's going to be very hard for her to do. And I think what's going to happen, and I think that's, although Congressman Reed never said this directly, I think once they get some sort of agreement in the Senate, which again will take 60 votes because of the cloture requirement, then I think you may have the President and the Senate on the same page. I think Pelosi may still oppose that, but I think it's possible that the House membership generally will just simply go ahead and approve it. So it's possible they'll leave her standing by the roadside in this situation. She may want to recoup some kind of face-saving position. I'm not sure. I must say, I listened to her on C-SPAN, I think it was last night on the floor. That woman, I think, has some problems, frankly, and in terms of her speech and her ability to articulate.
Yeah, reporters and commentators have been noting that for about a year or so.
Yeah, I think there might be a little problem there, and so the unfortunately the country's paying the price for that. It's.
I thought it was interesting what Congressman Tom Reed said about House Speaker Pelosi being too influenced by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Well, I don't think that's the key problem here. I think the key problem is that Cortez is sort of the tipping point or the salient point of some really leftist members of the Democrat Party, and I can't believe there's too many of them think that she's their leader, but she has, as we've said before, adopted the Trump approach toward politics, which is to make the most outrageous statements, to be as obnoxious as she can publicly, and the press just picks it up. They just gobble this up. You know, it really is kind of sad. The press goes on and on about the deep divisions in this country, etc., and they're the ones that are fomenting them. They're the ones that are fomenting these divisions. I mean, this incident with this kid from the Catholic school down in Washington, D.C., totally out of context, totally played up by the press. They're backing off now. But, I mean, it's just any chance the press can get anything to cause any kind of outrage, they're going to play it up, and people like Cortez play right into that. I guess she's a Democrat's problem. Let's hope she's not the country's problem.
Hey, Dr. Robert Heineman, wanted to ask you that the news this morning is that Roger Stone is being charged by federal officials in the Russia investigation.
Well, I don't, again, I've listened to him. He's been on Fox News here and there trying to exculpate himself here. But I think what you're going to find is, as in a lot of these situations, it's not so much anything that he did originally, but his participation and lack of cooperation, or perhaps misleading the council. It's just very hard to tell. But typically, these people get themselves in trouble by getting charged with perjury and obstruction.
They talk too much to the press. That probably didn't help.
The what?
Talking too much to the media when you're in that kind of situation with the feds probably is not a good idea.
I don't think it makes them happy, that's for sure. I don't know if there's anything specifically illegal about that, but they're going after him, I think, basically on judicial or procedural grounds of one sort or another. As our friends in the audience may know, that it's against the law, it's against federal law to lie to a federal agent. And I think it's also against the law to give them written documents that are fraudulent, etc. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know on that. But I guarantee you, if you got an FBI agent talking to you, you better. It'd be a good idea to have somebody else there with you. So it's a crime.
Talking to Dr. Robert Heineman here on this Friday, January the 25th. Lots going on in Venezuela, Dr. Heineman. Did you have any thoughts on the situation with the replacement of the leader and the way the people are reacting down there and the way that the media is covering it here in America?
Yeah, I can't handle. I have a couple colleagues who are really quite knowledgeable about South America and the South American situation. You might want to talk to one of them here later.
Sure. Dr. Heineman, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in 30 seconds. Stay with us.
In with the new and out with the old in the new year. We're talking fiber versus cable, and fiber wins. Empire Access with the fastest internet in town. Fiber speeds 100 meg down and 20 up, bundled with digital TV for just $65 a month. And if you want to share, stream, game, surf, and learn 10 times faster than that, upgrade to gigabit speed. Only available from Empire Access. Ditch that cable and make the switch today to the fastest fiber internet. Bundled with TV for just $65 a month, a savings of over $340. Online at empireaccess.com.
Back with Dr. Bob here on this Friday in January 25th, 2019. Well, Elizabeth Warren is now picking up what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been talking about, attacks on wealthy Americans. The Massachusetts senator, according to the Washington Post and Newsmaker, is now forming an exploratory commission into looking into running for president, and she thinks, according to this story, that the wealth tax would be a good idea in helping her. There's another story online on the Empire Report page saying that New York billionaires are getting very nervous about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Your thoughts, Dr. Bob?
Well, there are a couple of points I want to make here. I can get to that here in a minute, but I do want to say about yesterday's votes in the Senate. Those were kind of important to McConnell and to Schumer, because they got a sense of whether they could hold their party people in line. And on both sides, they pretty much did. So McConnell has 50-52 votes that are holding pretty tight, and Schumer has about 44, somewhere in there. So today, and apparently they're meeting and talking, and I'm perhaps talking today, they're in a position to say, well, we can do this or we can do that. So the importance of the vote yesterday really was, are there people going to hold steady? And that gives them maybe a little different bargaining position. Now, as for the tax on the multimillionaires, we've gone through that before. And he would go back to the so-called Laffer curve there, in which Laffer pointed out that the higher the tax rate, the less revenue you're going to bring in. Because if you're dealing with somebody like Bezos, the Amazon guy, or some of these other large corporate people, and you have an opportunity to expand your plant and bring in another 100 million or whatever. If your tax rate is 70%, you're giving 70 million of that back to the government. And a lot of entrepreneurs will say, I just assume get on my yacht and float around Southern California, and why should I expand my business when I'm giving 70% to the government? Now, if you keep the tax rate down there at 30, 35%, then the guy might well say, well, yeah, I'll expand. I'll give the government their 30 or 30, and I'll end up with 50 or 60 million. So it's a pretty clear insight into the psychology of these people who are out to make money and produce things and such, and rate at that rate just sort of stifles the whole economic development in that respect. So it sounds good, and especially sounds good at this point when you got people who are out of work and living paycheck to paycheck and borrowing money because of the shutdown. But the effect on the economy, it pretty clearly has been shown, is really quite oppressive.
Talking to Dr. Robert Heineman. Dr. Bob, you mind if we switch to state politics for a moment?
Oh, sure, we can take a look at it, yeah.
Well, Wlea has been extensively covering Senator Young's press conference and her statements and the statements from the other legislators like Assemblywoman Marjorie Burns and Assemblyman Phil Palmisano and State Senator Tom O'Mara on the RHA, the Reproductive Health Act. Now, if the national talk show hosts had not covered that, I think WLEA would have been the only radio station in the state maybe talking about it. The media outlets did not give Senator Young in her press conference a lot of attention, I should say any attention. And this is a statewide thing. They're pretty much gone to sleep on it. With all that's been in the news this week with Senator Young leading the charge, wondering, does that open up the doors possibly with Senator Flanagan's situation of being in a rehab situation? Is Senator Young poised for another vote? Do you think she'll go in that direction to try to become the Senate Republican minority leader?
It's very hard to tell what's going on in the inside circles there in Albany, Brian. I think if they ask her to step forward, she will. I'm not certain how vigorously she's going to push her candidacy in this situation. Typically, in these situations, some middle of the road compromise candidate comes forward. I would like to say on this whole homicide issue on pregnant women, what's interesting about this is the pro-choice people continually argue that preventing them from having an abortion destroys the woman's choice. The woman, carries the baby, etc. It's her choice whether to abort or not. But this law goes directly against a woman's choice. I mean, if a woman's carrying a baby and carrying it 7 or 8 months or even 3 or 4 months, she obviously wants to have the baby. And for somebody to assault her and kill the baby seems to me goes directly against the pro-choice position. And so it's strange that these guys are pushing this kind of legislation. But again, I'm not inside their minds.
Talking to Dr. Robert Heineman, getting back to our 8 to 8:30 interview with Congressman Tom Reed. The Jonathan Mark had a very interesting show there with Congressman Reed. Seeing that topic of the Coast Guard not getting paid, it pops up on thehill.com this morning. And there's a story, Senator Schumer blocks bill to pay the Coast Guard. And it says Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, blocked a request to pay the Coast Guard Thursday after Republicans refused to open the rest of the federal government. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana tried to take up legislation to pay the Coast Guard, but Schumer blocked the request after first asking Kennedy would he modify his request to instead open a quarter of the government currently closed. Your take, Dr. Bob?
Well, I think that sort of thing shows how out of touch Senator Schumer is with what the country's thinking. That sort of thing, again, I don't think Schumer's nearly as inept in these things as Pelosi is, but the bubble, as Congressman Reed says, is encases these people, and it's become so personal that it's very hard for them to get a perspective, I think, on what the rest of the country, how they look to the rest of the country. And let's hope Congressman Reed and a few other like-minded people can put together something halfway reasonable here.
On Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, and this is from thedailybeast.com, this past weekend during Senator Kirsten Gillibrand's first Sunday show interview since she announced she's running for president, CNN's Jake Tapper asked her a question. If Trump's immigration positions are racist, were they racist when you held some of those positions as well? She paused and then told Tapper they certainly weren't empathetic and they weren't kind, and I did not think of suffering in other people's lives. Jake Tapper pressed her on it, and now the Democrats and the media who are against Gillibrand have picked up this line that, and they're all running with it, that Gillibrand used to be a racist, basically, is now what they're saying. A ridiculous accusation. Now, Dr. Bob, Gillibrand has been fighting off accusations from George Soros that she was mean to Senator Al Franken, because Gillibrand is the one who pushed for Al Franken to step down, because Senator Franken there was going to be on the committee that dealt with Brett Kavanaugh, and Gillibrand saw that as a clear potential embarrassment, so she wanted Al Franken out of the way. And she said in her defense when people came up against her, hey, Franken's got 8 accusers. What did you want me to do? Your thoughts on this situation, and also the power of George Soros possibly influencing these media talking heads to go after Gillibrand?
Well, I don't know where Soros, what he's doing bouncing around there. His name always comes up. But I do think what you're going to see is a real cutthroat, backstabbing, etc. Phenomenon across the whole field of Democrat candidates. And I do think there are candidates working to get left-wing and sort of identity politics types like Gillibrand, and then like Bernie Sanders, and now they're going after Joe Biden, who is no left-winger by any means. But as you know, Biden, before the last election, gave a speech, I believe in Michigan, in favor of a Republican candidate. They gave him $200,000 at the fundraiser, I guess. Gave some supporting statements to a Republican candidate who then, in fact, won. And, of course, they're using that against Joe to say, well, that's outrageous, etc. I think, again, Joe Biden, if he were 5 or 10 years younger, would be a really serious candidate at this situation. And, frankly, it's possible he'll emerge anyway. Of all the candidates, frankly, he's the one that can actually speak to people and relates, I think, pretty well across the board to people. And you don't have too many others in that situation right now in the in the Democratic field.
What about now? About a year or so ago, there was talk of a Joe Biden, Joe Kennedy ticket. Joe Kennedy, the Massachusetts congressman who's been working on a lot of factory legislation over the years with Congressman Tom Reed. But Joe Kennedy's name never seems to come up as of late. You hear names like Kamala Harris, Kirsten Gillibrand, Senator Cory Booker. Do you think a Kennedy could ever run again?
Well, I don't know. I don't know much about this Kennedy at all, so I just can't say on that. And I suppose if you got a primary of 12, 15 people, it's not going to take much to put you toward the top. So that's one of the reasons I think they're cutting each other up to try to get some of these people out of the way. And maybe George Soros is pulling all the strings.
I sort of wonder that because you see Soros going after Gillibrand, and then all of a sudden all the reporters turned on her. That's why I asked that question earlier. Dr. Bob, thank you so much for joining us live on Newsmaker today.
My pleasure, Brian. Carry on. We'll talk to you later.
We'll do it again.